All right, guys. Well, next up in the prep spotlight, of course, always brought to you by our friends at Capital Sports Fieldhouse, is ABC 12's weekend sports anchor, Yousef Nasser. Came across seeing his stuff. If you follow him on Twitter, or if you watch ABC 12 on the weekends, we've seen a lot of high school sports coverage from Yousef. So that's kind of what made me think, like, hey, perfect opportunity to have him in the prep spotlight. So first of all, thanks, Yousef, for joining us, and give us a quick background. How did you end up in Flint at ABC 12?
Long journey. First of all, pleasure to be here. Thank you, Matt, Jared, Ted, for having me. Long journey. I've always known that I've wanted to work in sports, maybe since I was about 12 years old. You don't know how exactly you're going to get there. My undergrad journey was a lengthy one, a lengthy process, but basically, I ended up graduating from University of Mary Washington. It's a small school in Fredericksburg, and while I was doing that, I interned at a small high school sports website. It's called dmbstream.com, and that's actually where I met Brandon. Brandon went to Sioux Falls from DMV Stream.
Okay.
I went to the Medill School of Journalism to get my master's, and then I went to Lincoln, Nebraska, first as a news reporter, but always having an understanding that I did want to try to pivot it into sports. It's very competitive, as you know.
Yeah.
But a few things worked out. Caught a few breaks, and I was able to become the weekend sports anchor there in my second year in Lincoln, Nebraska. So I got to cover the Huskers and the high school sports in that area. At the same time, Brandon, after going to Sioux Falls, he goes to obviously Flint, ABC 12. I think he's been there for 4 years, and
Yeah.
I think that was when Jason and Sydney were there. They, go their separate ways, as life takes you on different journeys. And, Brandon ended up being the sports director, I think, in early 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And at that point in time, he reached out. It's like, hey, what do you think? What do you think about coming on board, being the weekend sports anchor? I looked around because my contract was up in Lincoln at that time, and I thought, who better to team up with than Brandon Green? I know who he is. I know,
Yeah.
his work ethic, the passion he has for sports, and I knew that I could come in and mirror that. And I had a great first year with him. Doing the highlight zone, doing some of the other stuff we got a chance to do, and I'm even more excited for this second year upcoming. So it's been a lot of fun so far.
Awesome. So I want to ask, before we maybe dive into a little more, or maybe some specifics on some spring sports in mid Michigan. I was giving you, before we started recording, a little background of the three of us, all working in the sports media business at, different levels, different places. I have a great appreciation for local news, and especially Ted, who's called sports radio for over, close to 40 years. I think the three of us, we have a great appreciation for local news, high school sports on the radio, high school sports being covered by the local news stations. Charles Barkley made some headlines recently. He said something like, "I would never listen to sports on radio. I don't get it," or something like that. And sadly, we've seen some local news stations in some smaller markets being closed for whatever reason. And personally, I said sadly, it's kind of sad, because I think we were all athletes growing up. We had highlights on ABC 12, back in our playing days. I think it is so cool hearing, especially in maybe the smaller areas, these kids having their highlights on the news, having their games being broadcast on local radio stations and stuff like that. You're making a career now at a weekend sports anchor, and I'm sure you're looking to maybe climb the ladder. So a long-winded way to ask you, like, what do you think about what's the value to you about covering high school sports and getting these kids who probably may never go play in college. High school is the last time they're going to suit up. Like, how cool do you think it is to cover these guys and
Matt, I
girls?
love this question because it was very honest about the current landscape and how the industry has evolved. But to me, I understand what you're talking about in terms of like sports coverage, local sports news. It may not be the same as when Ed Phelps, back in the day, or Reese Davis back in the day at ABC 12. I picture maybe kids, all huddling around the TV to watch, what they had to say in the evening or maybe the morning or whatever.
Yeah.
But I still believe that it does mean a lot to these kids.
Hmm.
And it's just that they get the content in different ways, whether that's going to our website or whether that's on social media. Maybe they don't watch the show live, but they see the snippets and the clips, and there's an excitement level when they see me or Brandon walk up, camera on our shoulder, interviews after the game. There's still that nostalgia, and I believe what the industry is attempting to do, and hopefully can continue to do, is try to meet people where they're at. Whether that's a Twitter, whether I mean your podcast is on YouTube, right? I think YouTube
Yep.
is like, it's not the future, it's the now. It's a little
Yeah.
bit. I think YouTube's kind of been that venue for where people get their information and their content. And um, I still believe that there's value in this. And the reason I like what I do, the reason I like sports, the reason that, I'm going to take this thing as far as it can go is because I believe in sports. I believe in sports' ability to teach young people lessons in life in a very clear way. Let's say you have a turnover in basketball. You have a choice to make. Do you run back on defense, or do you just stand there?
Hmm.
Like, if life hits you with adversity, do you, take it, or you try to learn from it and bounce back, learn from it, and take the next step? Nobody's path is perfect. Nobody's, life is perfect. But I think that sports has an ability, a unique ability, to teach you a lot of life lessons, whether it's teamwork, whether it's bouncing back from adversity, whether it's setting aside your ego for something that's a greater type good. So, um, you know, I, I believe in sports. I plan on being in sports in some capacity for the rest of my life, and that's why I'm here, is because of that belief, and because I feel like Brandon and I, we have the at this stop in our careers, we have the potential to um, help highlight some of the positive characteristics of this community, from a sports aspect, and from a real life aspect as well. So it's been a blast being here. Flint, Saginaw, Corunna. It's been a blast being here in this area, and I'm excited for what the future holds. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Yeah.
One of my favorite stories you did this past year, and I'll be honest, I was a little confused when it first came out because I didn't realize I was actually at the game. It was Corunna versus Flint Hamity, where Corunna's rival, Chesaning's basically student section, decided they were going to root for Flint Hamity that day. Can you explain what was going on in that gym that night, and how you kind of perfectly encapsulated it in your story?
Well, Chesaning, they have one of the most dynamic student sections that I've seen. In my year being here, they had three guys, I think Landon, Levi, and Banks, who are kind of like the student section leaders. And they told me they realized last year during Hamity's playoff run that they didn't have, kind of your traditional student section. So they decided, because I think Chesaning was the host site of,
Yep.
a game, that, they were going to team up with the Hamity cheerleaders and be that student section. And it was really a wholesome type thing. And, in that game, obviously Corunna was there as well. Like, it was a pretty close game through three quarters. In the fourth quarter, Hamity pulled it out, and I think that having that support, having that backing, is awesome. Giving those high school kids an opportunity to feel, what it's like to have a student section going wild. So, it's little things like that. It's something different, every game, but it makes you appreciate what you have an opportunity to see, and how sports brings people together. That's a perfect embodiment of that. And
Hmm.
um, I think it's there's no deep backstory other than it's like, hey, these guys don't have a student section. The way that we go out for these games, so we're going to show them love, and we're going to root them on. And it was really cool, and you could tell. Sean Bird, who I talked to after the game,
Yeah.
guard for Hamity, he was like, I love Chesaning. I love Chesaning, and we need you guys. Come on. And it's just like those. You asked how you capture it. It's through the eyes of the athletes. It meant a lot to them to have that backing, have that support in an intense playoff game. Because if you remember, I mean, Corunna had their student section packing too. So it's like, it's really cool to me how sports bring people together, and you could tell it meant a lot to those kids. And hopefully, this upcoming year, if Hamity makes another big run with Jacoby Boost and company that Chesaning is there for the ride. Provided obviously Chesaning wants to make wants their team to make it far as well. But it was a cool deal for sure.
Yousef, we really appreciate you taking time out to join us here. And I have a question. I do love all the storylines that you're able to get into with the local schools. It really adds a lot, and I don't think it's ever going to go away. But one question I have is, and I think I've definitely been through this, I love this podcast because we can get down and real with our guest, and just be ourselves. But tell me a little bit about on your Friday nights, especially when you're getting ready to go on air with Brandon, because right now we're nice and loose and just being ourselves. But, when the lights come on or the microphones click on, it's a different thing, isn't it? I mean, it's like showtime.
Yeah.
Break that down for us a little bit.
So I would say one of my core beliefs is that authenticity is key. So obviously, when you're doing television, like you say, when the lights are on, there is like a professionalism you have to have. There is that broadcaster mode you kind of have to go into. But I would say it's like the broadcasting version of who I am, outside of what I do. So who am I? I'm a person who is kind of silly, like to joke around. You can see some of the humorous elements and some of the stories that I do. I like to highlight things that are funny. And for me, like going back to what Matt was talking about these kids aren't going to have an opportunity to be interviewed and covered. Not all of them are going to have the opportunity to play in college and play in the pros. So we want to create an environment, a platform, an atmosphere to where, hey, look, for these 10, 15 minutes, like we're going to cover this like it's the Super Bowl. We're going to cover this like it's the big show, because these kids deserve it. They work a lot of really hard in order to to compete and have fun with their friends. And so I try to meet that energy. So when I step in a Corona or when I step in a Chesaning and you feel the student sections going crazy and you feel the teams going back and forth, shot for shot, touchdown for touchdown, whatever. You want to recreate that in the studio. And I'm genuinely, when I see a crazy game, like I'm genuinely that kid inside me is like, wow, this is cool. Like, how do you recreate that moment? Through whether it's doing highlights or whether it's putting a story together a few days later, like how do you create that environment? How do you create the way and share the way that it made you feel when you were in that building? Yeah. So it's that's kind of what I would say for that, Ted. And I'm sure you see that as a play-by-play broadcaster as well. There's nothing better when a team hasn't been able to get anything going on offense, and then all of a sudden, quick pass, 25-yard run or whatever, they're in the end zone, 4 downs to get a score. And you as a play-by-play broadcaster want to meet the moment. Sometimes you want to let the moment sit and speak for itself, but also you want to do that moment justice. And that's how I kind of feel when I'm doing the highlights on with Brandon or doing highlights on the weekends or whatever. I want to, try to replicate an authentic excitement and enthusiasm that I have and some of these kids have as well out there making those plays.
100%.
Yeah. We've actually we've had some really cool interviews with some different other people who do play-by-play at different levels. And it seems like even Dan Miller, who, kind of does it at the highest level, I guess you can say. It seems like that's what they all come back to. Ted has even mentioned that before through his career, having to learn that, being authentic. You got to be yourself. If you're trying to put on a fake act or whatever on the radio or on TV, people at home they're gonna know it. When
that's not to say you can't take pieces of okay, I like the way that Ted makes this call. I like the energy he has on this call. You're yourself, but you can still take tidbits of, I look at, sports media as a whole, and who are some of my, role models. I would say Ernie Johnson, TNT. You look at Dan Patrick, you look at Rich Eisen, Scott Van Pelt. These are guys, I understand that, they do their own specific thing, but these are guys in terms of their way to be charismatic and connect with people. I look at Ernie and it's like, the guys with, 3 former athletes, 2 Hall of Famers and Shaq and Chuck, and then obviously Kenny Smith, who's a champion, and he's in complete control of the ship. He, is completely himself, let's, highlights them in terms of like, what makes the show funny, their personalities. And he kind of like steers the ship in that way. And so you can learn from that, but it's like, I'm not going to be Ernie literally, with the glasses or whatever. And, like I'm going to take things I appreciate about what he does, add it to my craft, take things from, what anybody does and try to add it to my craft and, ultimately, be the best version of myself. So,
yeah. I'd say that's true with any form of art or media,
exactly.
whatever.
Yep.
You take a little bit of something else and add it to what you're doing.
Yep.
Well, we talked about we're three Cavaliers, so let's one of the recent stories I saw, you interviewed the Bauer brothers.
Yep.
And right now, especially for Corona, but even in all of mid-Michigan, they're kind of a big story, whether it's football,
100%.
basketball, or track. So how's it been covering them? Because, for Corona, very storied school, storied program with, some of their sports, but, kind of goes in waves sometimes. Right now, obviously, they're on a very high wave.
Yep.
And so what's it been like covering those guys? And what do you see? Do you think they have legitimate track, any sport, even next fall in football, some state title aspirations?
I think that, what stands out about them is that their athletes, when they step on whatever field of competition they're in, they have confidence that they're going to be the best. And maybe it's because they've always pushed each other. You talk about twins and sibling rivalries. Like, I imagine, I've got, some of my best friends, one of my best friends, he's a twin. And it's just like that competitiveness. And it's like, they're always, going at it,
Yeah.
whether it's, competing, mentally, academically, in sports when they used to play. And I just see like, Wyatt and Tarek, like iron sharpens iron, right? So, we see them racing in the 100, the 200, they've been doing that their whole lives, I would imagine,
Right.
whether it's playing tag outside or racing outside or whatever. And I've no doubt that, they've got the kind of work ethic and natural talent to, potentially win a state title. I became first aware of them. I didn't see Corona football in person last year, but there was a play against Goodrich where, we run the clip. I think I ran it in that story where Wyatt, rolls to his left and throws a bomb to Tarek, and he brings it in. It was like our highlight of the night for that given highlight zone that given week. And so that's when I first kind of became aware of them. And then basketball season, you see these, big, strong kids, playing in the post, high post to, low post passing, physical. And, so when I walked into the Flint Metro League track event at Holly, they stand out, right away because, they're bigger kids and,
Yeah.
Wyatt's got the flowing hair, Tarek had it in a bun, and, the horn sounds, and there they are, at the front of the pack against some, quality track athletes, running with them. So, and the relay event, I just have like it imprinted in my mind where it's like, Fenton is way ahead of Wyatt, and Wyatt just clears it like it's nothing. So, they're special athletes, and they're only juniors. So they say their goal is to place as high as they can in state, and I've got no doubt that they've got the talent and the work ethic to do so. And they've got a year left. I think they both recently got an offer from SVSU too, which is exciting, and it means that the community of Corona has a lot to be proud of, and I'm excited to get a chance to cover them. They're one of a number of kids I'm excited, because this first year, you're learning the landscape of all of the schools, all of the teams, some of the rivalries, and the second year I feel like okay, I've got some of the backstories, and so I'm excited to see if Corona can beat Goodrich in football this year. It's and those two kids are a big reason why they've got the athletic program has hope in the three sports that they're in, because they're terrific.
So in your past year here, now that you kind of got the lay of the land, like you're saying, what have been some of your favorite athletes to kind of cover here in mid-Michigan area, and maybe some of your favorite, football fields or basketball arenas? What's your favorite, places to visit on Friday night?
Okay, on a Friday night, I'm going to start by saying, because you asked what my favorite, the moment that stand out to me most is actually when Powers won the state hockey championship, because it's like such a storybook type game. I mean, they take the early lead. and then, other team is able to tie the game, and then 4 seconds left, Mason Zarnicki able to score the game or the goal to win the game. It's just like, and Powers wins their first state championship in 50 years. I mean, that was like being there, you get chills. And, I was also happened to be like on a deadline, and that game was like, I was like, please don't go to overtime. Please don't go to overtime, because I'm not going to be able to get this in on deadline. And, he scores the goal, pandemonium, people going crazy. I'm rushing down the ice. I know I need to get a sound bite and, cut the highlights as quickly as I can. So I walk up to Mason, interview him, and he's like, first of all, the guy was, overwhelmed with, emotion, because, one of the biggest moments of, his life. And he said, I'm going to go enjoy this with my friend. But it made for a great soundbite, because what was it? It was real. It was honest. It was direct. And, I was able to, turn the highlights for 6, and we did a story a week later on that run. So that was probably my favorite moment. In terms of places to go, I mean, honestly, there's an element of like, when you're going far out, because people see the highlights, like, Ted, like we're talking about, they see the final product, but everything that goes into like getting there, it's very stressful, right? You've got to go boom, 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 cut, make sure all of the lower thirds are right. So it's like, I think of it in terms of like managing all of that. But Grand Blanc is fun. Davison is one of the better teams in the area. I'm excited to see Corunna this year. I haven't been there last year. When they had those games at Atwood, that's always a cool experience. I think, but I appreciate everything for what it is. Even I went up to Laker one time to cover a game, and that was pretty fun. Obviously, Frankenmuth and Goodworth, they both made it to the state championship. So those teams are awesome, and I like going to Frankenmuth just in general. So
you can go to Bronner's, get some fried chicken.
I actually haven't been to Bronner's.
Okay.
I did something funny where we did a season preview, and I was asking Aiden Horde, the quarterback, what is Frankenmuth known for? He said, chicken, and then I added and Santa, and then I asked him if you had to pick just one, Bronner's or Zenders.
Yeah. Zenders or Bavarian Inn. Bavarian Inn.
Exactly. Like, what would you go with? And he was like, well, my grandma used to work at Bronner's, but I love the chicken. I've got to go Zenders. So it's just like those little, like, each of these towns, like, surrounding Flint and Saginaw, they have like their own like character, their own like vibe, feel. And so like, Frankenmuth is an example of that. Corunna, Chesaning is an example of it. And it's cool to, Linden Fenton, I live near Fenton, near Lake Fenton. It's cool to see and feel and, get the vibe of different towns. So it's like, you asked, what's my favorite? I think that there's something unique and special about each and every one of them. Yeah. So, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, Yousef, I've watched you from day one. I remember your debut, and I'm a TV 12 guy myself. But one question away from the prep spotlight. We'll end it up here, okay? You're a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I want to know about that. And then tell us a little bit about that, and also tell us a little bit about what your feeling is for our Detroit Lions this next year. The hype is phenomenal. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but what do you think?
Okay, so first, Philadelphia Eagles fan. I was born in Philadelphia, grew up in Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia. So, 20 minutes south of D.C. So everybody growing up was a Washington fan. And, it's like, I'm not a Washington fan. I'm an Eagles fan. So it starts, the Donovan McNabb era, Terrell Owens, playing in the Super Bowl on the injured ankle. We lose that game. McNabb throws 3 interceptions, but it's like, I'm thinking in my head, okay, we're going to get back. We're going to do it. We never had a run quite like that. We made it to the NFC Championship game against the Cardinals 2008. Then Michael Vick comes in, exciting, but never really had the playoff success. Feels like we get a quarterback in Carson Wentz. We have the dream season. He gets hurt. I'm devastated. It's like he was supposed to be the MVP. This is a guy supposed to win the Super Bowl, but it kind of shows you like how cool and crazy and random sports can be. Where Nick Foles has the playoffs of his life and wins the Super Bowl. And then obviously this year we have this past year we have a juggernaut team in the regular season. Jalen Hurts, breakout star. Another guy could have won the MVP. Take it all the way, to the Super Bowl again. He's going toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes. We have a chance to win, and then obviously the holding call on James Bradbury ruins it. To answer your question, Ted, I'm an Eagles fan. I'm an Eagles fan because I was born in Philadelphia. You can't change your birth certificate, so that's
right.
kind of where that allegiance lies. As far as the Lions, I love the Lions in terms of getting to watch them every Sunday and Dan Campbell and the way that they came back from down 1-6 record, they lose to the Patriot. It looks like, oh my gosh, same old Lions, and then they have the grittiness and Ben Johnson, the offense, explosive.
Yeah.
Jamal Williams had the 17 touchdowns last year. I'm excited. I'm a big Jameson Williams fan in terms of I think the kid is absolutely electric. I mean, I wish the gambling suspension didn't happen, but I do think he's going to be revved up, ready to go when he comes back healthy. Amon-Ra St. Brown, I had a chance I went to the Lions-Eagles game coincidentally week 1, for ABC 12. And, I asked Amon-Ra, kind of about his mentality. And it's just the guy is super, super driven. A lot of fun to watch him play. And I think that even though the team got, some heat about the draft selections of Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell, I mean, Gibbs, you can't typecast him as just a running back because what he does in the receiving game is so special. Right. And then, Campbell, I mean, there's the team right behind him. Tampa was going to take him at 19 if they didn't take him. So I've got optimism about the Lions. And because all of the quarterbacks are in the AFC, you look at, if you look at a list of quarterbacks, Jared Goff is, in the NFC, he's pretty high up there. So you have a quarterback, you have a chance. Ben Johnson's offense is terrific. You've got to do it. And I understand that this state of Michigan, Detroit, they've been sold the sun, moon, and the stars, and sometimes it's been a disappointment. But I do have optimism for this year's team, and I'm excited to see if they can be, one of the top teams in the NFC with the 49ers, with the Seahawks, with the Eagles, with the Cowboys. I really think they can because number 12, he's not in Green Bay anymore. So all of a sudden, the division, you've got the Vikings, right? Maybe Justin Fields can take another step with the Bears. Maybe Jordan Love can keep the Packers afloat. But, Lions year, baby. Let's make it happen.
It is.
Amen. Hashtag since 57. Well, Yousef, we appreciate the time, and tell our listeners again the best way to catch up with you. We know ABC 12 out of Flint, but maybe on the socials.
So I'm used to Zoom, so I didn't know you could put your little Twitter handle on there. So at Yousef, Yousef Nasser, Nasser TV on Twitter. That's the best way to keep up with me. It was a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. Appreciate the time.
Capital Sports Field House is the home of hit and pitch and a whole lot more. The 10,000 square foot turf field can be used for all indoor sports training, including football, baseball, basketball, softball, soccer, and many other activities. Hit and Pitch has 7 indoor batting cages with full pitching tunnel and the state-of-the-art Hit Tracks training system utilized by MLB organizations. Located in the old Capitol Bowl J.C. Penney block on South Washington in Owasso, Michigan. For more details, call Capital Sports and Hit and Pitch at 989-472-4624 or online at capitalsportsfh.com.
Well, that's good stuff from Yousef. Nice to meet him. We've had both guys from TV 12. Brandon, also a good guy. I enjoy their highlight show. So speaking of highlights, let's just jump right into here locally as we wrap this up. In track and field, the Corunna boys finished second in the Division II regional to Frankenmuth. We were talking about Frankenmuth with Yousef, but the Cavaliers lost out the regional championship guys by 1 point. And the difference was the final events. The Cavs were just edged out in the 4x400 relay by the Eagles. Just a tough loss, but they got the state finals ahead of them. I'm sure they'll do fine. Tarek Bauer set a new school record in the long jump, leaping 22 foot 9 inches, edging out his brother Wyatt by an inch. The Bauer boys also went 1-2 in the 100-meter with Tarek taking first, 11.04. Andrew Tucker won the pole vault. The Cavs won 3 out of the 4 relays. So, as they get ready for the state finals, they're cranking into gear just at the right time. They look pretty good.
Is it bad? And this, I don't want to derail the segment, but is it bad that the whole time we were talking to Yousef, he was wearing a Fiesta Bowl sweatshirt from Michigan versus TCU? That's all I wanted to ask him about the whole time, was how much of a dumpster fire that game must have been for him.
Yeah.
But it's just funny that that's all I could think about with all the positive stuff we got going on locally in high school sports.
Yeah, like that would have been a good question for him.
Yeah.
How dare you wear that shirt?
Right. Especially on this podcast.
I mean, it was a sweet little quarter zip, but
Yeah.
it was pretty depressing ending.
Also in track, in the Division III regional, Chesaning's Levi Meyer won the 800, anchored the winning 4x400 relay, giving the Indians a second place finish. Also in the regionals, Ovid Elsie's Trice Tokar took first in the pole vault, going 14 foot 8 1/4 inches for a new Marauder record there. In baseball, we've talked about Corunna. The Cavalier baseball team now has won 12 straight, beating Flushing 4-2 in the Flint Metro League crossover. Braden Anderjack got the W and had a couple of RBIs with a double and a triple. Chesaning baseball, they won the outright MMAC title, sweeping Mount Morris 7-2 and 8-3 earlier this week. And let's end it here in soccer. We haven't talked much soccer, but Owasso goalkeeper Lily Usher set a new MHSAA record for career saves. She now has a total of 717, beating the previous record of 713. So how about that? An Owasso Trojan with a state MHSAA record. That's pretty impressive.
That is impressive. I thought I saw an article posted about that, and I meant to look more into it. So I'm glad you brought that to the prep spotlight. But that's got to be. I wonder. Do you know how long that record had stood previously?
It hasn't been too long. I think
okay.
2020 might have been the senior year, but it hasn't been that long. But still, it's impressive.
That's impressive. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
I've always thought goalie was a very cool position. I didn't have the frame for it my entire life. Small, slow, so never really could play it. But I always thought it was one of the cooler positions in all sports.
Absolutely. A little sidebar too. It's amazing. Apparently the Trojans defense a little porous. There's been a lot of shots on goal.
Yeah.
So Lily's had to be in action a lot, and it hasn't paid off in a lot of wins, but she's been one of the real mainstays, obviously, with that new state record.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Kudos to her. Another quick little sidebar.
Yeah.
We don't have to go too deep into this. So you said you weren't a goalie, Jared, because of your frame. I've always thought, imagine if someone like LeBron James or Victor Wembanyama, who's going to be a top NBA draft pick, were a goalie. Someone who's 6'8", or Anthony Davis, with the Lakers, 7 foot with that wingspan. Like, do you think that would translate to being a goalie, or is it a different like athletic skill set? I've just always thought about that.
No, I think it could translate almost immediately. Not saying LeBron at 38 years old like he is now, but LeBron at 22 years old, you give him a summer to play the position, he'd be incredible. I think that's what a lot of guys. I mean, Kevin Durant, they're so big and lanky and nimble on their feet. It's perfect for a goalie.
Yeah, and I always thought in hockey, just a big fat tub of goo in front of the net would be a great goalie.
Honestly, I've always said the same thing, and like I've always wondered: is there like a rule? Is there like a weight limit? Because you don't want to encourage obesity, but what if you snag one of these 450-pound guys, slap all the pads on, and just sit them in front of the goal?
Yeah, you would think it would be pretty good, to be honest.
Yeah,
you don't even have to move. Just sit there and get pelted by pucks constantly.
Not my ultimate goal to get pelted by pucks. I will say that. All right. This has been the Prep Spotlight as we get sidetracked a little bit, brought to you by Capital Sports Fieldhouse. We'll have more coming up here on the podcast right after this.